Good evening and welcome, everybody. It really is an honor to be with you again. Y'all are our family, our eternal family. And to be straightforward and honest with you, back at Central, we have a theme this year. You know, your theme is fruitful. Our theme this year is disciple. And something I've been saying at the beginning of each lesson to them is I say, well, welcome to Central, where we are striving to be disciples. And that means doing life with Jesus so that we can become more like Jesus. That's what it's all about. Discipleship, in reality, don't get hung up on that old first century word, vernacular. It's all about becoming more like Jesus. That's the call. And so I love that your theme this year seems to emphasize that you want to become more and more like Jesus. All right, you got your Bibles with you. We're going to be in Acts 28. Acts 28, if you want to put your bookmark there. But for now, I want to breathe in 1 Peter 4, and we're going to take a look at verses 7 through 11. Now, our main focus is going to be verse 9 of this passage, but I want to soak up the context. Peter writes, "The end of all things is at hand." That is a hugely important statement. This perspective, it frames everything which follows. The end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be self-controlled, there's a B, and sober-minded, there's another B, for the sake of your prayers. Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Now, here comes our main verse. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. Now, we're about to get to something a little different. And I want you to think about verses 10 and 11 as being different, and I'm going to tell you why later. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks as one who speaks oracles of God. Whoever serves as one who serves by the strength that God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To Him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. So, once again, here is our main text. And we will be laser focused on the Christ-like quality of hospitality this evening. Now, to begin, I want to share some cultural, historical background notes on the subject of hospitality. Plumtree records the following. He says, the Christian traveler came to a strange city, and he was in a position of no little difficulty. The houses of heathen friends, if he had any, were likely to bring trials of one kind or another. He might be taunted and persecuted for his faith, or tempted to run to the same excess of riot with them. Inns presented too often scenes of drunkenness and impurity, foul words, and fouler acts. It was therefore an unspeakable gain for such a one to know that he could find shelter in a Christian home. Important. Barclay, he gives us the following. He says, not only did the missionaries like Paul need hospitality, the local churches also needed it. For 200 years, there was no such thing as a church building. The church was compelled to meet in the houses of those who had bigger rooms and were prepared to lend them for the services of the congregation. Thus we read of the church which was in the house of Aquila and Priscilla, and of the church which was in the house of Philemon. Important historical context. And then Vincent provides this. He says, hospitality appears with the very beginnings of history. Largely as a result of nomadic conditions, it was peculiarly an Oriental virtue. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, commendatory judgment is awarded to him who has fed the hungry and clothed the naked. The Old Testament abounds in illustrations, and the practice of hospitality among the Arabs and the Bedouin is familiar through the writings of travelers in the East. Great stress was laid on the duty by the Greeks, as appears constantly in Homer and elsewhere. He continues, hospitality was regarded as a religious duty. The stranger was held to be under the special protection of Zeus, who was called the god of the stranger. The Romans regarded any violation of the rights of hospitality as impiety. And Cicero, who would come around about 100 years before Christ, a statesman, writer, he says, "It seems to me eminently becoming that the homes of distinguished men should be open to distinguished guests, and that it is an honor to the Republic that foreigners should not lack this kind of liberality in our city." All right, so there's some historical, cultural context that we'll touch on a little bit later. The Greek word translated hospitality, philoxenos, and what I want you to know is that if we were to break down this Greek word, the first part, you might see it looks like phileo, love, or Philadelphia. That means friend. And the second part, if you ever heard of xenophobia, which is fear of the foreigner or the stranger, we've got a lot of that going around. Don't have to tell you about that. All right, that means stranger. So literally, the word means friending the stranger. Even in the law of Moses, one can read of the importance of proper treatment of the stranger. When a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So this law essentially teaches the Jew to native the stranger. Treat the foreigner as one of your own people. And again, the original Greek, if we go back to that, it's saying something similar. Again, to friend the stranger. In addition, as you can see, if we come back to the Leviticus text, the Lord reminds them, the Israelites, that they too, hey, don't forget, you were strangers in the land of Egypt. The receivers of this very law would have remembered what it was like to be treated poorly there, humiliated, reduced to slavery. And such a thought should have inspired them when they came across a stranger or a foreigner to treat them better than the way they were treated. And so look at that. It's kind of like the golden rule, you shall love him as yourself. You're to think about how you want to be treated and then treat them that way. And we might do well to think similarly. How do I wish I'd have been treated in Egypt? They were asking. How do I wish to be treated when I go somewhere that's not my home? Ask that question. I mean, probably all of us can think of a time in which we were mistreated because we were outsiders, or when we weren't welcomed or honored as a visitor. And these recollections, they should inspire us to make sure the visitor, the stranger, the foreigner is never disrespected, never mistreated the way we once were. I want to provide one more historical background note for you. The Didache is believed to be an early writing in church history, somewhere between 1st and 2nd century A.D. And it has a section called, quote, hospitality to travelers. That's one section of it. And here are some of the instructions found in that section. Receive everyone who comes in the name of the Lord. Examine him and learn the nature of his situation. If he's only passing through, help him as much as you can, but he must not stay with you more than 2 or 3 days. Continues, if he wishes to settle with you and knows a trade, let him work and earn his bread. If he doesn't know a trade, use your judgment to decide how he should live as a Christian among you, but not in idleness. If he will not do this, he's trafficking upon Christ. Beware of such men. You know, just interesting that this early literature, there's a section about hospitality. That's really what I'm bringing up. Now, I want to hit rewind here because I think with all the talk about friending the stranger, you might think that it only applies to how we treat unbelievers, random community members who come into our lives. But Peter must think there's more to it than just that, because he says it is something that we should do to one another. It should exist even inside of, most definitely inside of, the Christian community. This comes, one another, from the Greek word alelon, which Pierce, in his outline of biblical usage, adds can also mean reciprocally or mutually. I want to emphasize this. Hospitality should flow freely in both directions among Christians. The gracious and abundant hospitality you show to us when we visit Buford, we should be eager and willing to share with you when you visit us in Augusta. In fact, if you take a look at a Greek concordance, do you see how like G240, it shows up twice in this verse? That's our alelon word getting a double usage. It happens sometimes, rarely, occasionally, in these one another verses of the New Testament. And I like to think of the writer as putting like super duper double dog emphasis on the mutual reciprocal quality of whatever he is talking about. So hospitality to one another, super duper double dog, has to be there. It's essential among disciples. I mean, think about all that history I was sharing with you. Think about it. Back then, in the first century, you had to have it if you were a Christian because, like we discussed, even the pagans were doing it. Even unbelievers saw how important it was. So how sad would it be if the church wasn't hospitable? And I think the same is true today, just in a different sense. I mean, Chick-fil-A knows how to greet you with a smile and to my pleasure. Starbucks has recently rediscovered the importance of getting out the Sharpies and writing your name and a friendly note on your cup when you place an order. I mean, they get it. People understand hospitality and they see the need for it. So if they see a need for it, if they get it, we most definitely should. Because, never forget, the way that we show we are true disciples, with all due respect, is not through fancy Sunday morning attire. It's not through long prayers, not through contemporary worship arrangements. It's all about how we treat. It's all about how we love one another. That's it. Jesus said that, not me. So, I think at this time it'd be good to learn an example, learn from an example of hospitality. And we will do that in an unexpected place. If you put your bookmarks in Acts 28, I want to take you there. The Apostle Paul's on a ship headed for Rome when there is a shipwreck. And all on board the ship, they're able to safely make it to the island of Malta. And let's pick up reading there starting in verse 1. After we were brought safely through, we then learned that the island was called Malta. The native people showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and welcomed us all because it had begun to rain and was cold. When Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and put them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened on his hand. When the native people saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, "No doubt this man is a murderer. Though he has escaped from the sea, justice has not allowed him to live." Paul, however, shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. They were waiting for him to swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But when they had waited a long time and saw no misfortune came to him, they changed their minds and said, "He's a god." Now, in the neighborhood of that place were lands belonging to the chief man of the island named Publius, who received us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. It happened that the father of Publius lay sick with fever and dysentery, and Paul visited him and prayed, and putting his hands on him, healed him. And when this had taken place, the rest of the people on the island who had diseases also came and were cured. They also honored us greatly, and when we were about to sail, they put on board whatever we needed. All right, let's learn several lessons from the gracious hospitality of the native people to Paul and to these shipwreck survivors. First of all, If the barbarians provide such amazing hospitality, how much more should we? The English Standard Version labels the people of Malta as the native people in Acts 28 and verse 2, like you see here also in verse 4. But the original Greek word is the word barbaros, which older translations translate as the barbarous people or even the barbarians. Now, I gotta be honest with you. When I think of barbarian, there are two images which come into my mind. One is an Arnold Schwarzenegger character from the 1980s in film, and the other is a WWF wrestler from the 1980s. And both of these guys, I'll just be honest, they're a little rough around the edges. And so there's a bit of a disconnect for me when I hear that I'm learning about hospitality from barbarians of all people. I mean, you know, these are supposed to be the examples of hospitality right here, the poster child, if you will. But I'll say this, I mean, Jesus has a way of pointing to unexpected people to learn lessons on love and humility and discipleship. I mean, a tax collector teaches me how to pray. Are you serious? Or a good Samaritan? Is there even such a thing? A poor widow teaches me how to give? Really? But again, that's Jesus for you. Great examples in unexpected places. These barbarians, the native people, I don't know if you picked it up from the context, they're clearly not Christians. But they sure do provide a warm and friendly welcome like Christ desires for us to do. I want you to observe the following. Verse 2. They kindled a fire and welcomed us all. Emphasis on the word all. You go to the end of chapter 27, you find out that's a whopping 276 people on the ship. All of them. Verse 7, a chief man on the island named Publius received us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. Verse 10, they also honored us greatly. By the way, the Greek means honored us with many honors. And when we were about to sail, they put on board whatever we needed. And one thing that's always made me wonder, where did they get the ship? Probably had to have been given to them, most likely. And so, again, I ask, if these barbarians provide such amazing hospitality, how much more should we? You know, are we more like Chick-fil-A or McDonald's? And you know the difference. I shouldn't have to tell you. I don't think I have to talk about it. So, number two, second, we should imitate their unusual kindness. Speaking of Chick-fil-A, I'm just buttering up Kyle. That's where this is coming from, just so y'all know. Some of y'all are probably aware they offer an 8-count or a 12-count nugget option for us grown-ups. You can probably look at me and guess I'm more of a 12-count guy myself. Well, let me share with you what sometimes I find happens. It's been recorded in the annals of history that I've gone to Chick-fil-A, ordered a 12-count nugget, opened the box only to find the most wonderful of surprises. I have been given not 12, but 13 glorious chicken nuggets. And now I know what some of you might be saying. You might be saying, they messed up. They made a mistake. They missed the mark. But from where I'm sitting, I'm here to tell you they did a great job. At the beginning of verse 2, we find the following. The native people showed us unusual kindness. Unusual kindness. The pair of Greek words which we translate as unusual literally mean missed the mark. In other words, there's a kindness you expect in this situation that's at a certain level. If you think about a measuring cup or a line on there, but their kindness, it missed that mark entirely and went well and beyond that mark. Do you get it? To Paul and the others, it was like getting the 13th nugget in the box. And it kind of reminds me of what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 8 when he reflects on the giving among the churches in Macedonia. They were going through difficult, trying, impoverished times. They begged Paul for the opportunity to help needy Christians. They gave not just according to their means, but beyond their means. And Paul, he labels all of this as not as we expected. The NIV expresses it also in a way befitting the original. They exceeded our expectations. In other words, they missed the mark, but in a good way. I just want you to think about this. When a visitor walks into this church building, passes you in the lobby, or sits next to you on the pew, or when a guest enters into your home, is there anything about their experience of which they would say, wow, their hospitality was just so unusual. It just exceeded my expectations. When visitors walk into these doors, we want to absolutely astound them with our hospitality. It must be unlike anything they've ever experienced before, unusual. So I want us to strive to miss the mark in a good way. Let's strive. Grab a hold of the metaphor. Let's strive to be the 13th nugget, if you know what I'm saying. Third, we should welcome others as we would welcome Christ. Oh boy. All right, I know what some might be thinking. You're saying to yourselves, well, Craig, the thing is, the only reason why these barbarians showed such gracious hospitality to Paul and the rest of the survivors was because the native people thought that Paul was a god, like we saw in verse 6. They would have never done all these things otherwise. They thought Paul was a deity. So, okay, that's interesting. And let me see. Here is my very educated, scholarly response to your observation. So what? I mean, really, so what? Are we not called to do the same? To give honor to the stranger because we never know who the stranger might be. The Hebrew writer, he says it this way, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. That's good, that's powerful, but more importantly, Jesus expresses that hospitality is one of the significant differences between those who are invited to inherit the kingdom and those who are not. In Matthew 25, the king tells the blessed, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And baffled, they respond, okay, when did we see you as a stranger and welcome you? And the king then replies, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. You did it to me. In reality, when we see the stranger, we need to see Jesus. And the way in which we honor, respect, serve, and welcome him, we should strive to do the same for the stranger. As if he or she is Jesus or an angel in disguise. That's an especially fitting message if you remember way back the very first part of the lesson, what we were saying. The end of all things is at hand. That context, I think, fits with what we're talking about here. All right, returning to the original text, way back in 1 Peter now, the apostle encourages his readers to show hospitality without grumbling. Without grumbling. Plumtree adds further context. He says, it lay in the nature of things that sometimes strangers might thus present themselves with inconvenient frequency. I mean, as we read these words, see if you understand if you've been there. Inconvenient frequency, under inconvenient conditions. I mean, to be honest, that's commonly the way it is. The stranger is inconvenient or unexpected. And how easy is it to just complain, to be self-centered, to be grumpy, to be selfish, to be irritable, to be exhausted, lazy, or just busy. I love the words here of the pulpit commentary, succinctly expressed, but perfect. Murmuring would take from the hospitality all its beauty. One complaint, one critical word, that is all it takes to wilt the entire bouquet, to spoil the entire banquet of good deeds. And so I want to encourage us all, let's let our loving hospitality let's let it be pure and without stain. A pair of other notes before we draw our study to a close. The only two other appearances in the New Testament of our word hospitality are in 1 Timothy 3:2 and Titus 1:8, both in reference to elders, to the shepherds of the church. They are to be lovers of hospitality. The elders, the shepherds, not the shepherds' wives. Are you smelling what I'm cooking? The shepherds themselves should be examples of hospitality to the flock here. Second, let me also note, if you have 1 Peter still open before you, we talked about this earlier, that Peter's going to begin an exhortation on the use of specific gifts in verse 10. That's verse 10. Where are we at? We are in verse 9. And so he's not started talking about specific gifts for specific people in our verse for tonight. The implication is that love, verse 8, and hospitality, verse 9, are not gifts only given to specific individuals. They are qualities expected of all Christians. I really want you to listen to this. It is not only the responsibility of those with a badge on Sunday mornings or those who've signed up on a list that says greeters at the top of it. It's not only their responsibility to be hospitable. It is expected of you too. It is expected of all of us. One of the things that Central I'm trying to encourage is the mindset of Jesus. When we come, we got to have the mindset of Jesus. I came not to be served, but to serve. When we wake up every morning, but especially on Sunday morning, and you're going to come here, that has to be the mindset. Not what can the church do for me. No, I came here to serve, not to be served. Very important. Paul, he'll say it this way elsewhere. Welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God. We're loving and welcoming because Christ has welcomed us. Again, isn't that your theme, fruitful? It's been all about that, about becoming more like Jesus in all of these ways. And so we also welcome as Christ has welcomed us. And that means at least the following. We don't seek to please ourselves. We're instead trying to build other people up. We are willing to sacrifice. We're willing to lay down our lives if necessary. And even strangers, even outsiders, even the different are welcome here. As you have been welcomed by Christ, think about all the ways that applies, so also welcome others for the glory of God. And essentially that right there, that is the message of an invitation. I mean, this is it. And I believe that Jesus would desire for us to communicate that to you tonight. That you are welcome. At times like these, to the afflicted, the disheartened, and the broken, we say, you are welcome. We will pray with you and be there with you. To the prodigal child coming home from the far country, we say, you are welcome. And we will lead you to the Father. To the penitent, finally ready to surrender to Jesus, we say, you are welcome. And we will go into the water with you so that you can rise up new and forgiven. You are welcome. Everyone is welcome. If you have any need, please come while together we stand and sing.